how has journalism changed or evolved to where it was before to where it is now? Because you've got, and I hate it when people say they're content creators. I never use that, but I'm like, because I say my background um, was in radio, and I worked at a lot of community papers, and I've always loved telling stories. And I grew up with Walter Cronkite, watching him when I was a little kid or whatever, and I love the storytelling. And I just recently got back into this. My background, I'm a single dad, raised three kids. So I was raising my kids and everything, my two girls and a boy. And my boy is in 12th, and my daughter, one daughter just got her nursing license. So
Oh,
I moved out of taking care of people with disabilities, did that for 15 years. And I said, I want to see if I can get back into communications, interviewing people again. So I'm learning the tweets and how many subscribers and likes and all that kind of stuff. But everybody says they're a content creator, or everybody says they're a blogger slash journalist. Okay. And to me, when somebody puts the name, that you've done for your career, whatever, journalist, and they're just a guy that's just giving out news, and they're not really giving out news. I've seen some of the streaming shows, they will stream other shows on their shows and talk about it.
yeah.
Okay.
It's an echo chamber. It's an
Yeah.
echo chamber.
Yeah. So,
And the echo chamber doesn't do anybody any good.
yeah.
This is a town. I hate to say this because everybody's decided that this is a terrible town to begin with, but one of the Oklahoma City bombers came from here.
Oh,
And
wow.
I did a story back when this was when I was at the Milwaukee Journal, and I did a story at the time. This is before the internet, but
Okay.
there was chat rooms and on bulletin boards, and I did a story about how dangerous these bulletin board chat rooms were
Mhm.
because people start talking about, oh, we ought to go blow up the federal building. Well, if there's nobody in there that says this is a stupid idea,
Right.
what about there's a daycare center there? What about all the little kids that are in the daycare center who are going to lose their lives
Right.
because you wanted to get back at the federal bureaucrats? And there's a lot more people than just federal bureaucrats who live there, even if you do
Right.
think that it's okay because you don't like the bureaucracy to kill them, which I think is a pretty fundamental question right there.
Uh,
But that if you put this in this echo chamber where you start thinking, well, this is fine. This is what everybody wants. This could
mhm.
lead to very disastrous effects on society. Um, but what used to happen, what originally happened in the
Uh-huh.
history of newspapers, was people would go to a news. In fact, it happened in this case. This is a town. This newspaper is 155 in 100 volume 155.
Mm.
154 years ago, there was a town up north of here called Detroit, not
Uh-huh.
Detroit, Michigan, but Detroit, Kansas, that was
Mhm.
in contention with Abilene, Kansas, to
Oh, wow.
become the county seat of its county. Detroit lost,
Mhm.
and there's nothing left of Detroit anymore. But there was a newspaper there, and the people from this town went up to Detroit and basically bribed the editor to come down here
Okay.
because they said we need a newspaper. If this town's going to grow, we need a newspaper. We need somebody that will provide information. And most of the newspapers, most of the great newspapers of time, have been bought by people who were in the town,
Mhm.
thought that the town needed a source of information, a good, professional, unbiased. Now, there have been a few that would have said biased, but
Right.
for the most part, unbiased source of information for the community. And that's how they started their newspaper. It wasn't
Wow.
about, I'm going to invest in this property. It wasn't about, I'm going to be a content creator.
Right.
It was about, I was going to be, my town needs a source of information, and it's my town. And
Mhm.
interesting enough, that's why I'm here. I mean, I bought this paper. My father had worked here for many years, and he and I went together 25 years ago while I was still a professor
Okay.
and bought the paper. And I will be honest with you, I have never thought that I would ever see that money again. It
Uh-huh.
was like I donated it to make a monument or something.
Right. Right.
I don't take a salary.
Okay.
I will. We at the end of the year have, if there's money left over, and from the looks of it this year, there's going to be,
Right.
but we split it up with the staff.
Okay.
We tried to make this an employee-owned business. It just
Okay.
didn't work for a variety of reasons, but we split it up with the staff. I will take that if there's a bonus at the end of the year, but I don't get a paycheck.
Okay.
My pay comes only at the December 31st. I get paid. So really, I'm not a person who believes a whole lot in money. I get a retirement from the state of Illinois for being a tenured professor of journalism, which is more money than I need. I haven't yet taken my first Social Security check. I waited till 70 to apply for it. I
Right.
also get a little retirement check from the Milwaukee Journal. I have more money than I need. I mean, I should never say this to anybody, but I
Right.
do. I don't need it, and I don't want it.
Mhm.
And so, really, there isn't anything anybody can do to me.
Mm.
I don't care. I'm never going to sell this pay. I've said long ago that someday I will be the one of the top 10 largest newspaper companies in the United States. Not because I plan to grow.
Right.
There just won't be 10 others,
You can be one of the 10.
and oddly enough, we're the 123rd or 124th largest community in the state of Kansas.
Okay.
Marion is. With the outpouring of people subscribing to our paper after this, we have the 8th largest circulation in the state of Kansas right now.
Wow. Man.
We've had more people subscribe in the past month and a half than was our press run prior to that. So we have more than doubled in size. And we were doing pretty well, just to be honest with you.
Right.
We were already doing pretty well. We were beating out a lot of the newspapers that were bought by, discount pharmacies and hedge funds that wanted to go in and sell the real estate. Because, newspapers have always had really good real estate. They have the offices always right in the heart of downtown, and it's a big, nice building, and they needed a lot of space because they used to have the presses there, and most of them don't need that anymore, so they've sold it. They've sold that. They've cut their staff. They don't really care. I mean, there's the neighboring daily newspapers around us, and we have bigger staff. We did before this have a bigger staff than most of them, and in fact, all of them now. There are some that have the staff of zero. That other newspapers come in, or there's somebody from out of state is coming. You can't do that in this business. Now it's hard to recruit people to come work in little rural areas. I will grant you that. We have trouble doing it, but we're not going to give up. And I don't care if the town, doesn't patronize us. We've got other advertisers. And I don't care if we don't have other advertisers. We're still going to publish a newspaper because this is what we do, and we're going to do it.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, if you do it and you do it well, one of our biggest advertisers right now is somebody who 20 years ago just hated us because we reported. It was one of those bond issues that were for the jail, and they'd paid for ads, and they didn't disclose that their car dealer. They didn't disclose who was doing it. Well, obviously, car dealer has a big interest because this was going to be financed by sales tax, which it shouldn't have been, and we editorialized it shouldn't, because sales taxes are really bad on people of low income. Everybody buys about the same amount of food, and they pay about the same amount of tax. And then there's a worse tax that they inflate the cost of electric utilities, and that hurts the poorest people the worst, because you all use basically the same amount of electricity. In fact, if you're in a poor household, you probably use more because it's not as insulated. You don't have the hyper efficient appliances and so on. But both Marion and Hillsborough, the towns in here, they own their own electric utility, and they make most of their budget comes off the electric rate.
Okay.
Then the sales tax, then finally the property tax. Well, all of them are supposedly targeting people, but the property tax hurts small businesses and hurts businesses because the tax rate on businesses is roughly twice what it is on residences. But So it can go both ways. And there's not a lot of equity in how the taxes work, but it's hard to get people interested in those stories. But we try to write them. And
So, how would you describe your paper in one word?
in one word, if I can make an, the word I would like to say is truth. I
Okay.
mean, that's what we don't care. I mean, what do we have this week? How the cops discovered a credit card skimmer on pumps at a gas station around
Okay.
here. How there was a debate over two things where the hospital and the pharmacy didn't like each other. They're worried about the cost of remodeling some things. This is pretty kind of a dull week, but
Right. Okay.
it depends on what's out there. I mean, we like to engage people with stories.
Mhm.
We got a real interesting story that's not really news, but it's a very long memoir of this is Old Settlers Day weekend. So,
Okay.
and that's a celebration. And so we've got this very long story about what it was like to be a pioneer on the prairie in 1865. And what
Oh,
makes it really unusual is this is a woman writing it. Not
okay.
not your guy who's going to tell you about how he killed
Right.
his bison and whatever else, but it's a unique perspective that I haven't heard a lot of before,
Okay.
and it's a long story. I think people will like it, and what they charged for things, which was ridiculous. And getting groceries in those days meant you had to drive, on your horse
Oh
for
yeah.
20 miles in some direction, and then pay really overpriced uh, prices for things that were not very good.
You're almost fit to
So,
pay.
but this is,
Mhm.
keeping it honest. Yeah, I think that's what we try to do. Your title of your podcast is sort of where we are.
So now,
And
what do you think now? After everything that happened over the past month or so, you still didn't think, you know what? Maybe I'm done. Maybe it's time to go, or this invigorated you even more because of response across the world.
it initially sort of invigorated me more because it seems that there are people, even if the local community doesn't always appreciate it. And
Mhm.
it's funny because they'll appreciate parts of it, and then
Right.
the other parts they won't. When it agrees with their sentiment, they're going to appreciate it. When it doesn't, they won't. And I understand that, and it will take them a while. But as I said before, sometimes the people who were our biggest haters
Right.
now become our biggest supporters and advertisers.
Okay.
It ebbs and flows depending on what the issue is. People
Right.
don't like the truth being told sometimes.
Right.
The idea that you have to speak truth to power is that's what we try to do. I mean, we try to speak truth to whoever it does. We also try to entertain people. I mean,
Mhm.
I'll be very honest. We're not just eat your vegetables. We're going to give you some dessert. We're going to give you some fun features. We're going to give you nice things to read, the supportive things to read. We'll try to give you some cute writing once in a while, and other things, because we're a conversation. You're inviting us into your home, and if all I do when I walk into your home is look at how horrible this is, look at how terrible this is, you're not going to invite me back into your home that often.
Right.
So
Right.
you've got to kind of talk to people in the way you would socially, but we're
Mhm.
not going to kowtow to anybody. I mean,
Right.
we're not going to put, and you can't make us. And I will stop publishing the paper before I do let that happen.
And this has
Uh,
made you go even harder now, as far as this, on my focus, because I guess,
I
you
don't
know.
know. The story isn't over.
Mhm.
The tale isn't over. Um, there are people a little more willing to participate in things. The mayor who I've talked about, there's a different person is the sole candidate.
Uh,
This is a problem. We're having elections. The filing deadline for the election coming up in November was back in June.
oh
Well, a
wow.
lot has happened since June,
Okay.
and I think that some people are seeing that things change a little differently.
Mhm.
If and we're going to have discussions with the candidates and talk about it and see what's going on. if it's not just for show,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not, we're all going to sit around and sing Kumbaya together, and then afterward we're all going to get in lockstep and put our jack boots on and run all over somebody's rights.
Right.
If that's what it is, then we're not happy. If people are really going to make some effort to not just listen but also talk,
Mm-hmm.
speak up about what they care about, um, it may do some good. But honestly, one of the advantages of doing this as being a college professor for 26 years, and I was chair of a very contentious committee for the campus, is that you recognize that change happens very slowly,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
very slowly, and you've got to give it a chance to take root and grow and nurture this little seed and watch it come up and hopefully it will get better and people will become more involved, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
Most of the things that happen overnight are artificial and they're fake, and they're people who say they care about something, but they don't really. They're using this for their own benefit somewhere or another. So we're just going to sit there and say, okay, there's another way. You can think about it this way. You want to find out what's happening in your community? Well, we'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you care about your community, you'll probably think, if you keep hearing this, maybe you'll do something about it. I don't know.
And,
I
and
don't know whether they will or not, but
and
we'll
now
give them a
just
shot.
because of your mom and her passing, how it's opened up, I guess, really discussions about the depressed and community and.
She'd be really happy. I mean, when you're 98 years old, you're going to go soon. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and when you're 98, you don't have a lot of power to do a lot of new things. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're resting on your laurels. Uh, and she was extremely, and I'm sure she would have loved it, if it had been bluebirds and doves and all of her family members around her and saying goodbye and saying I love you one last time and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But she was also a fighter, and if you watch that video, you can see that.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that although she was terribly disappointed with what had become of the newspaper community, the
Right.
relationship between the newspaper and community that she had worked on for 60 years, 70 years. She was disappointed with that. But I think the fact that her standing up for this has brought some attention
Mm-hmm.
from people around the country. I think she'd be really proud of that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was sort of, in dying, I was able to do something,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's sort of the idea of a posthumous hero.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that she would like. That's the type of thing that I think she would like. She was able to accomplish something in death that the rest of us it was hard for us to accomplish. It got some attention, and whether it will do good or not, time will tell.
Well,
But we keep going after these things and trying to do things. And as I said before, it's not, I don't have an agenda.
mm-hmm.
My agenda is let people make up their agendas.
Right.
I'm at the service of the people. People don't necessarily believe that.
Mm-hmm.
They believe but they believe that for a long time about the media.
Yeah.
At one point in my career, I was the page one editor of the Milwaukee Journal, and I
Okay.
basically was deciding what was on page one. And people would assume, well, the editorially, you guys wrote about this, that, and the other. And a good friend of mine was the editorial page writer.
Okay.
And one thing I never did, and I told him, I said, I've never read your editorials. I have no idea what your editorial is. I don't know what your stance is.
Right.
That's intentional. I don't want to know. I want to make up my mind on what's going to be on page one and how we're going to spin it based on the news, not on what you've said about the news. And you
And,
can't do that at a small weekly because I write the editorials and I decide what's on page one.
right.
But
So
they don't. I do have this Chinese wall that comes up between them. What goes on page one is the most surprising news of the week, the thing that you would least expect in most cases, or that you most expect. You demand that there has to be coverage of something like this.
Right.
Um, but it's about surprise, and yeah, most of it's going to be bad news.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a perverse way that that's good. If it's surprising, you want
Mm-hmm.
bad news to surprise more than good news. I mean, if good news is surprising, that's kind of a sad testament about your community. That
Yeah.
I'm surprised something good happened here. You
Right.
know,
Because everything's pretty much all bad. And I'm like when I see stories, either writing or interviewing, I'm like, okay, that's an interesting person. That's an interesting story.
yeah.
And I tell people, but I want to put a spin on it just a little bit. It may be the same story, but maybe a little
Well,
quirky.
we will all naturally, and all journalists will do this. I mean, it's impossible to write something completely
Mm-hmm.
without a bias. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
your experience judges you and how you're going to do that. I mean, if I write the facts could be identical
Right.
and slight differences in words, and that's not bad.
Right.
If you're an African American male, I'm a Caucasian male, we're going to have a different take on something.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. It's that it permeates our existence enough that it's going to change something about how we write that story,
Right.
and it should. And in an ideal world, you're going to hear different perspectives from. You're going to hear what you're saying, what I'm saying, what somebody else is saying, and you're going to find the truth out of all
Right.
that. And you're going to listen to all of it. You're at least going to glance at some of it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you might not listen intently to it, but it's important to have that diversity, and it will always be some bias, but it won't be cram it down your throat bias. I mean,
Yeah.
it won't be, this is why you need to do this, that, or the other. It will be just a little bit of understanding. And the more that we can expose people to the human faces of the story. This is one of the things that's changed about journalism you talked about before.
Right.
The broadcast type approach to stories was always human face. You've got to have a human face. You've got part of it was the reality of you need video, you need a sound bite, you
Yeah.
need something like that. But the truth of the matter is the human face, which is the old Wall Street Journal approach in print
Mm-hmm.
to identify put a face on a story, uh, works well. It works well to create video, to also create still photos, to create an image, but it also makes it a little more understandable to people. If you can
Right.
say, this guy has that problem, this woman has that
Mm-hmm.
problem, and now walk a mile in their shoes and see what the problem is in there from their perspective, uh, might let you approach an issue a little differently. And that's been more prevalent, I think, in the past recent years than it was before. Journalism overall has gone through a period where they just are fascinated with the delivery mechanisms and what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. And we've got to be in print, it's got to be in video, it's got to be in
Right.
online, it's got to be all that. And they've kind of lost track of the message. I
And
think
because
I think
I have
we're
people that
veering back to the message now.
when
Maybe.
they talk about technology and people say, you know what, I've got like 8 million friends on Twitter, but technically you don't. Okay, just give you
No.
access to somebody to snap it, friend. But how many of us do have, real friends? We look at technology as good as it is. It's also bad because, like I said, doing the streaming and looking at stuff, and I'm literally looking at shows that are featuring other stuff. When I do this stuff right here, it's about as old school as can be. Okay,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have graphics. A lot of that I don't know, so I don't have it. Um, but I'm into the human because I'm like, man, let's go back to the days of telling stories and interviewing because so many people are doing the things where you talking and got the words going by and everything's so fast. Maybe there still are some people out there that miss the old types of it. I mean, I grew up with Charlie Rose,
Yeah.
uh, Larry King, all those kind of guys. And
Well,
I,
and NPR now, Fresh Air with Terry Gross, who's one of the best shows there is probably on,
so
and look back at old things that Edward R. Murrow used to
yeah,
do, and one of the things is that journalists these days are not as courageous as they used to be.
mm-hmm,
They're not as courageous about insisting that maybe this needs to be done this way.
mm-hmm,
You mentioned Cronkite before, and Cronkite by taking one day on the CBS Evening News and saying, we're going to spend 22 minutes of this newscast talking
Mhm.
about what's going on in the Vietnam War,
Right.
changed reality.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
changed the world. He earned that right by spending, great number of years before that being very scrupulously unbiased, presenting the news in a professional way. And when he just said, hey, there's something important that you got to listen to,
Right.
they listened.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know that we have that capability from anybody anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and in any medium, but we got so obsessed with we got to do this technologically. We've got to do this. We've got to support it. We've got to worry about the search engine optimization. We got to worry about the adding of video. We got to have a social media platform. And it's not, we can't just use Facebook and X now, which
Right.
we won't even get into that. We got to be into Instagram. We got to have a TikTok version. One of the reporters came here early on, and they said, "Now I got to do this thing on TikTok." And I said, "Oh, good. I can do something that no one in Marion, Kansas will ever see because nobody here uses TikTok."
Right.
But they're all Facebook people. But um, we just need to slow down and think about our obligation. It's not just that the news people have an obligation to provide this news, but
And
we as citizens have an obligation to consume it.
yeah.
And we don't often talk about that. We don't often talk about the fact that you need this before you go out and vote. We worry about the voter security. I worry about voter intelligence.
Mhm.
And I don't mean that the people who vote for one candidate over another are stupid, but uh, there's an obligation. You need to study who you're going to vote for,
Yeah. Yeah.
and realize you're exercising a right that's important, a responsibility that's important. And before I do it, I don't know, you're probably the same way as I am. I sit down and there's a bunch of candidates I don't know, and I look up who the heck they are.
Yeah.
I don't want to vote for somebody that I don't know who it is. And it would be nice if my media would give me all that information. But if they don't, it's still my responsibility to find it.
Mhm.
And hopefully, if people will support people who are trying to do what I'm trying to do, what
Mhm.
others are trying to do, what you're trying to do, uh, that it will be a little easier for us to do that. It'd be a little easier for us to find the information we need to do it, to do a good job of voting. And it will be easier for good people who are devoted to the idea of serving their community to run for office, be
Yeah.
elected to office, and serve the community, and serve it well. Now, that's not to say we're always going to agree with everything anybody ever does as an elected official. That
Right.
we wouldn't want that, but people who are doing this for the right reasons, doing this because they're that aren't the old line that says, oh, where are the people going? I must follow them so that I can because I'm their leader. No, we don't. We need leadership and people who will lead us in interesting directions and important directions. And we've had some, but it's been a while
Yeah.
since we had really truly great leaders that will change the nature of the way we are.
And
Um,
having people want to follow because like your paper. I said when I was reading about the story, I'm like, okay, here's a small town paper, and they're doing investigative stories, and your background in journalism and your family and myself, I say I don't see a lot. People
well,
doing this.
everybody needs to, and I'll tell you, it bothers me a lot. We're going to sue these people, and we're going
Mhm.
to probably win a big amount of money,
Mhm.
and that bothers me a little bit
Mhm.
because I we have to win a big amount of money because I've gone to press association conventions and seen that there's the newspaper the guy who ran it retired. He was probably a World War II vet. He
Mhm.
probably he understood what he was doing and why he was doing it. But the person who bought it is now the former secretary, the assistant secretary of the Chamber of Commerce, and has no idea what to do with this newspaper.
Okay.
And if they walk in and did something like that to her,
Yeah.
she'll shut down, and they'll get their way. They're subject to bullying. So we have to win a big case to show them that this can't be done again. But I don't want to bankrupt the city of Marion. I mean, the whole reason I'm here is to
Yeah.
help the city of Marion, Kansas. So I keep saying that if we win, so I don't like ever counting your eggs before they're hatched, but
Mhm.
if we win something, there's a very strong likelihood we're going to donate it to some project that the city of Marion needs. If the
Okay.
city of Marion, if the taxpayers of the city of Marion have to pay for it, well, maybe they'll get the thing that they really wanted that they couldn't get because they had to pay the settlement. But it might be the Joanne Meyer Memorial but it's going to happen.
And so would Congress be involved in some form or way just to make sure that people understand the things that you can't do? I hate to say it against a newspaper, or what you just period can't do. Because if Congress has passed and revised laws,
Well, a lot of it's just common sense. I mean, searching somebody's house or
Mhm.
office should be a last resort.
Right.
It's intrusive. It's objectionable. The first thing you try to do is you ask for it.
Mhm.
It's not like, well, what if we asked for it? What would we do? We would destroy it? No, we wouldn't. I mean, I understand that when you can't go up to the head drug dealer and say, well, sir, would you please tell me if you're dealing drugs?
Right.
But this isn't that case.
Mhm.
We could have found the truth easier. Just use common sense and not let the idea that you're trying to get somebody and make them line up. And I mean, how many times? One of the most interesting things about all the letters we've gotten, just huge number of them are from law enforcement officials, people in law enforcement, and I can understand why. They have been targeted. There are many good people in there who do this for the right reasons and do it well. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of people though that have done some really bad things, and they've become, they're getting condemned for that, and they don't want to get condemned for this too.
Yeah.
I understand that. So I actually wrote an editorial about that this week, and about something that cops in the nearby town did that was really a good thing. And it's
Oh,
just kind of a common little thing that they did, just investigating an accident.
right.
And that they went out of their way to do it right because that was truth, and their job is to find truth, and they
Mhm.
did it. So we have to think about those things, but
So,
um,
so now for fun, you said you were a Star Trek. So my question is, Star Trek is the first one. You
oh
like the
gee,
old one? You like the recent ones?
I actually kind of like the new Strange New Worlds that's come
I
out. But it's it's an updated version essentially of the original
okay.
series. I think I like that. I liked a lot of Deep Space Nine, which is
Oh yeah,
different.
it's one of my favorites.
Uh, and I really like almost anything. I like the idea. I like science fiction and the idea of thinking about things being different in the future,
Okay.
and the fact that it holds up a mirror to society. And there have been some really classically good episodes of that. The Deep Space Nine episode where Captain Sisko goes back and is Benny the cartoonist who can't in this that cartoonist
Right.
fiction writer in a fiction magazine, and how he can't get his word across. And then in the end, it's sort of this classic. Which is reality and which is fiction? Is the whole series fiction, and it's just something that came out of some writer in the 30s who couldn't put his name to his own work.
I remember now.
And
What
it's
about
a very good episode.
the Discovery?
Um, it's interesting. It kind of gets into very long story arcs. I don't like the long story arcs as
Okay, like
much.
sort of.
It's an interesting idea, and poses it's kind of changed from its original concept
Yeah.
of it was interesting to have a quote unquote non-heroic captain, but because she was started off as being you know excised, exiled basically, and coming back into it. I always wondered a little bit about that. There's a different take on things, but
because they got on the second season, and it's like
and it
everything
changed. Yeah, radically changed.
that we thought were nice is like, oh my God, he just, you know. So now, if you had to put this situation, well, first, which captain would you be?
Oh, gee. I would be Archer from Enterprise.
Okay. Oh man. Okay. That's my least favorite.
That's because just because I like the idea of being the first, sort of. I
Okay.
mean, that's the interesting thing. And I don't want to be a god like Cisco, and I don't want to be, Picard was kind of dull in some
Sure.
regards. Janeway was good.
I like it too. Yeah. And then Captain
And I like Pike in the current series
the new
too.
one.
But
Okay.
they're all good. They're all different. And
So I'm putting another spin on it then. Okay. So this whole situation the past couple of months, if you had to compare this in some ways to a Star Trek episode,
oh geez.
mirror, I don't know, something like that.
uh there was actually a really kind of bad episode in the first season of Next Generation
Okay.
where there was the conspiracy, conspiracy where they went to Starfleet headquarters and people had been substituted. It was really, it's kind of regarded, I think, as one of the worst episodes of Next Generation. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything terribly heroic out of this. The I don't know. It's a weird thing. I mean, I've recently had there have been people who've had discussions with us about doing documentaries, which I'm all in favor of.
Okay.
But they also want to sell life rights to do a movie and scripted TV series or something.
Oh
And I'm
wow.
worried about that a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
I don't like the. I remember when my son and I watched the movie JFK,
Right.
and he came up and says, "Whoa, I didn't know that this was." Well, no, wait a minute. There was a lot of license in this
Right.
movie to say things differently,
Right.
and I like drama that can solidify a view of something that might not be possible just out of the facts. But when it gets too spinny and too much separation from that, and you don't really have any rights. I mean, if
Right.
you sign these things, you're lost your rights. Uh, I worry about that a little bit. So I've kind of soft pedaled that. I've slow playing that to wait to see if I can get a documentary that actually works pretty well, and then after that, I don't care. I can always say, "Oh, look at the documentary. That's what the truth is."
And
Uh,
and with my I got about 3 minutes. Um, you've inspired a lot of people. Your mom's inspired a lot of people, and you just never know what's going to happen because you guys have already made a difference. And I've seen you on a bunch of interviews, and I said I don't know what spiritual belief you have, but God be with you for your strength and everything because you don't know who you're affecting. You
well,
know.
this is one of the things. Being a college professor, you kind of can't encounter that too. You don't know 10 years down the line, I've gotten so many notes from kids, coming back and says, something you said,
Mhm.
made my career or whatever. And you didn't realize it at the time. And sometimes it's like the kid who I never thought that was, the kid with the greatest promise or the whatever.
Right.
It was just somebody who was in the class. I went to yesterday. I went up to the University of Kansas, and they had a bunch of high school kids that I spoke to. 470 kids
Okay.
at a state press association. Afterward, there were like kids who wanted to come up and have selfies taken with me. I've never felt that anything I've done has been heroic or that I'm a celebrity or anything like that, and I've never wanted to do that. I kind of the backward way of this. I've always been a little uncomfortable writing editorials. I don't like.
Okay.
I would rather write a story. I would rather,
Right.
have here. I like to do graphics and things like here are the
Okay.
facts. I like numbers. I like facts. Unfortunately, this story aren't that clear of facts that you can
Right.
come up with that would make a graphic out of. But I don't do this to be a celebrity journalist. I don't really want to be a celebrity journalist.
Right.
I wouldn't mind being, having a few 60 minutes show the episodes that I could do, but
Mhm.
they'd be about certain things that I'd like to have that kind of exposure to.
Okay.
I don't have this great desire to sit at the chair and have it tick, tick, tick. And that's, I'm Eric Meyer with 60 Minutes,
Right.
no, that never's really been anything I've wanted to do. I kind of always had weird things I've wanted to do.
Mhm.
I was a congressional intern and I wanted to be a legislative aide because
Okay.
I liked the idea of, I didn't want until I found out that they did all this log rolling for politics. I thought
Right.
be really cool to actually write the law, to be the
Okay.
one who drafts the thing and figures out exactly how you make it work.
Okay.
That's I kind of like the behind the scenes. If I were in Star Trek, I'd be the guy who comes from the star base who's never really been
Oh
the
wow.
captain of a starship and has to take over in the case of a
Right.
disaster.
Okay.
I like those kinds of stories. I'm not. I don't want to be the hero. I don't want to be the president of the United States, but I wouldn't mind being a guy who would work in the legislature. Who
Who put
I
the
was
thing together?
well, and I was a congressional intern, and I was very impressed with the fact that congressmen have an office that does an awful lot of constituent relations and a lot of ombudsman work. And it was kind of cool to somebody calls up and says their social security's cut off and they can't get Social Security Administration to deal with it, and you can pick up the phone and say, hi, I'm from Congressman so and so's office and he's the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee for your unit. What are you going to do about this poor woman who's lost her Social Security here?
Right.
And that was kind of cool to be able to solve problems like that. But
And in the time we have, I think we're